Well, hello everybody. It's Kenny Martin here, recording live from my office in my house up at Tweedsmuir. And this is the first in the series of Loxley's lockdown lectures. I got a call from Debbie asking if I would do a webinar for her. But as my internet speed is 0.5 meg upload and 4.5 meg download, I had a wee bit of giggle at that and then responded back to say that fortunately I couldn't rely on the signal as much as I would love to be able to do it for her. So what I decided to do instead was do a little recording of a lecture that I have conducted now for probably 8 years or more to senior students at university, photography students. And it's all about my photographic hero, Arnold Newman. And some of you out there will know exactly who Arnold Newman is, and others will, it may be a new name. And you see here he's called the father of environmental portraiture, and he was the first person really to kind of go to people's homes and locations and businesses to shoot them for magazines, as opposed to what happened prior to the 1940s, which was they actually went to a studio to get photographs. So he's a very, very interesting photographer. His work is, I think, amongst the best and most meaningful portraits I've ever taken. And I had no idea, actually, that he had influenced me quite so much. It's only 20 years later, after getting his first book, which was in 1985, it's only 20 years later that I realised how much his work had influenced my work. And I've got a great debt of thanks to him for that. The reason I'm doing this, as opposed to my usual thing, which is business, for anybody that doesn't know, I run a thing called the TCMP, the Total Commitment Mentoring Program. And essentially I help studios succeed. And it's a long-term project with each of the studios. It's not just about lead gathering. It's about getting everything right in your business. But, I've just seen loads and loads of posts on Facebook about, how to make sure that your business is ready for coming back out of this lockdown. And I thought, let's do something a little bit different. We're inundated with survival guides and all the rest of it at the minute, so hence the reason I'm doing this. And let's face it, if you weren't watching this, right, you'd probably just be making another sourdough loaf, finishing off that tree house that you were building on Series 6 of the Vicar of Dibley, or whatever the hell it is you're doing in lockdown. I do hope you're all doing okay, by the way. I feel very fortunate that we are in the middle of nowhere. We've got a big garden, a reasonable sized house. It gives us a chance to breathe. And I feel very, very, very sorry for people who are stuck in a situation where they've got a couple of kids and a small flat with no outside ground and all the rest of it. I mean, I really do. My heart bleeds for them, to be honest with you. We've got Nina's mum here, my wife's mum, who's 90 odds with dementia. So we're in proper lockdown. We're getting food delivered and all that kind of stuff. So it's been an interesting time. But you know something, we'll get out of this. I don't think we'll get out of it as well as people think we will. I think there's going to be problems once the economy starts to open up again, because there is a lot of people who are not going to have that disposable income that, let's face it, as portrait photographers in particular, is our target market. But we'll adapt. We'll change the business plans around a little bit. We'll diversify a little bit, and we'll come out on top. Let's talk a little bit about Arnold Newman. I mean, as I say, I first discovered Arnold back in 1985. When I started my business, I got a book, and it really influenced me in the way that I look at photography, I think. Lots of graphics involved in it, lots of design involved in it, and that's the way that I tend to photograph, particularly when I'm doing my environmental style of work. He's a real hero to me. Now through this little presentation, what we're going to see is we're going to see some videos with Arnold himself talking about his life and his projects and his influences, and talking about artists, and talking about his beginning, early life, and shooting in Africa and all sorts of stuff. But I've also analysed his images now. I think I've selected 4 or 5 images that I really love, and I've taken them to pieces and built them back up again, and just to let you see the design elements that are actually involved in these images. At a glance you can look at these pictures and go, yeah, that was lucky, but there's nothing lucky about anything that this guy does. It's all utterly astonishing. I do apologise. There'll probably be some copyright infringements in this. There's a bit of jazzy music, and there's a guy who did the original interviews who really should be name checked, but I can't remember who the musicians are, and I can't remember who the guy's name is. So there you go. But I'm sure we'll be fine. This is done in the best possible thoughts in the best possible way, and it's meant to be a very positive thing about his life, and I'm sure that the Arnold Newman estate will be perfectly fine with it. We're going to start off with just a little video that I put together, little slideshow, some of Arnold's work, just to get us into the kind of groove, and then we'll go through a bit about his life and a bit about his images, and listen to some videos, and I really, I hope you enjoy this. I hope it takes your mind off the lockdown a little bit. I hope for the people who didn't know Arnold that this may be a little revelation for you, and you maybe go out and buy some of his books. And I would love to own an original, but I can't afford one. The prices have went crazy. So here we go. Let's start off with this fabulous little video slideshow of some of Arnold's work. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that extraordinary, really beautiful work. Arnold was born on the 3rd of March in 1918 in New York, and he died on my birthday, 6th of June, 2006, also in New York. Extraordinary life as a photographer. We'll talk a little bit more about his early life in a little timeline that we're going to go through. Find out a little bit more about the genius that is Arnold Abner Newman. So he was the middle of 3 sons when he was born in 1918. And then in the 1930s, with his family, they moved to Atlantic City and in Florida. And he got a scholarship to study art at the University of Miami. And it was only after a visit to the Museum of Modern Art in New York that Newman says that this exposure to the modernist style of painting released him. And sometimes it takes that. Sometimes it takes just seeing a picture or seeing a movie or something to stir something within an artistic and creative person. And in his case, it was the Museum of Modern Art. However, due to financial problems, which was rife at that point in the States, his parents took him out of university, and due to lack of funds. In 1938, he moved to Philadelphia, where his friends were studying photography, and he got a job in a 49-cent portrait studio. There's still a few of these around the UK at the minute, so I was only kidding. He states that this experience was very important for him because he came to understand the importance of the interaction with other people. And he was also experimenting with more radical ideas like montage, etc. It's interesting, this interacting thing, because another one of my favourite photographers is Lord Snowdon, and I think he's much maligned as a portrait photographer. I thought he was astonishing, particularly his use of daylight and the simplicity but absolute getting into the soul of his sitter. And I remember that Snowdon once says that this job would be so much easier if we could do it without a camera. In other words, that the interacting with the customer, with the sitter, is so important that once that camera, that impediment that's in between the photographer and the sitter, can quite often get in the way. And basically, he was saying that if we could get rid of that element of photography, which would be difficult, it would be much, much easier. But I understand exactly what he means. 1940, 1942, he was introduced to Stieglitz, and who encouraged him in his photography and arranged an exhibition of Arnold's work in New York City. And then between 1942 and 1945, he opened up a portrait studio in Florida, and he was developing using the idea of photographing people in their own houses, business environments outside and location during that time. And he was working as a freelance portrait photographer, and lots of very iconic images were taken in that 42 to 45 period. He opened up the Arnold Newman Studios in 1946, and he worked for just about every major magazine that you could possibly imagine for the next 60 years. And he became one of the 20th century's most celebrated photographers. His subject list is extraordinary, and his iconic images of world leaders along with everyday people capture the personality and the sitters that few photographers could achieve, and I absolutely agree with that. In 1999, he was awarded the Kodak ICP Infinity Award for Master of Photography, and of course he's got countless books and exhibitions under his belt. All in all, and I hope by the time we get to the end of this you'll agree with me, all in all, one of the greatest photographers I think that's ever lived. So we're going to do something there. We're going to actually go and watch a little video of Arnold talking about his early life, his beginnings. Now, the video is very small on the screen, but ignore that. The picture's not important. It's what he's saying is important. There's a few really interesting bits in this little video about equipment and how he was photographing like presidents of the United States and amateur equipment and all this stuff. It's really entertaining and absolutely fabulous. So here we go.
Working, people thought and still think that I've had large studios and things like that. I began at the beginning. Some of the best pictures which museums have were taken on a speed graphic with an 8-inch lens, or 8.5-inch lens. We used inches in those days, that the students would turn their nose up at. They don't realize it isn't the cameras only. Yes, a good camera is a better tool, enables you to do something you couldn't do before. But what you did with those, and then you worked out of your home, as we would say, we worked out of your bathtub. And I was brought up in the middle of the Depression where a dollar meant everything. When I came to New York and I began working, my first thing, I was working out of a bathtub in 41 to 42, and I was doing my experimental work and sleeping on my cousin's couch, and then friends let me come into New York and stay with them and things like that, because I was making absolutely no money at all. And then when I came back and I started work for life and everything else, of course I began to look for a real studio. And I shared, for one summer, a month and a half only, I rented a studio, which I mentioned before, which was pretty rock bottom. And I was turning out work for Harper Bazaar and Life and everything else. I had my own old enlarger, and I was still working for Life magazine and Harper Bazaar with a speed graphic with that 8-inch lens, because I couldn't. At that time, I hadn't amassed enough money to buy other lenses for different focal length lenses. And then I shared a studio, and we kept our costs down. And when I had my own big studios and was getting in a lot of money, I had an accountant who was, without mentioning names, they had the biggest names in the field. And one day he turned to me and says, "You know, Arnold, you take home, percentage-wise, more per dollar than any of my other clients." In other words, I didn't have a big showcase. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe that's why I didn't get the big advertising. I got a lot of big advertising agency. People came in thinking they're going to have a nice fancy entrance hall, fancy this. I wasn't buying the latest cameras every time they came out, every Monday and Tuesday, as they used to say. I just said, if this camera still works for me, I'm going to keep it. And if a camera came out that enabled me to do a better picture and I could afford it, then of course I would buy it. Like with the Canon cameras and things like that, that had a lens that tilts the swings and things. Nobody else had it. I found it wouldn't fit on my cameras, so I bought the Canons, which were wonderful. I've been using them ever since. You do it only when you have to. And when I don't particularly, in my way of looking at it, I want to see every hair, every bit of light. So I use tungsten light.
Okay, about the studio.
The thing is, when I needed strobes, I rented them. I didn't buy a bunch of strobes. I remember one of the greatest manufacturer of lights, then eventually strobes, if anybody remembers, Saltzman. Saltzman had the best lights there were. If you needed really the top stuff, you went to Saltzman, who was down there at Grand Central, where a lot of photographers were. And he announced he was going out of business. I said, "Why are you going out of business? We need you." He says, "I'm tired of repossessing my equipment." Meaning all these young kids came in, or photographers thinking they're going to make $1 million, and they got a couple of big orders to begin with, and then that's it. So they buy all this equipment, and the next day, they suddenly find and they don't get that kind of an assignment for another year. And this is what happened. And I just kept using my old aluminum reflectors. I was doing presidents and the top assignment for Light magazine with amateur equipment practice, which no, even the amateurs would turn their noses up. That it worked for me, and that's all that counted. Floating on air, going great, doing advertising, I had a rep for advertising and all of that. Suddenly, I began to realize nobody's calling me.
Yeah.
Nobody is giving me a ring. And I find that I'm really facing real financial trouble. And one day I damn near broke down. I found out it was just a coincidence. My best client, Frank Zachary, for Holiday magazine, when I told him what had happened to me, he said, Arnold, I didn't realize that I hadn't been giving you an assignment for over a year. And he threw assignment after assignment after assignment after me. And then others began to pick up and we just carried on. But I kept my overhead low. I was very careful. To this day, we have everything in the bank we ever dreamed of. Not in the bank, and thank God they're all in bonds.
So what's so special about Arnold Newman? Well, I reckon there's few portrait photographers practicing today, or indeed who have ever practiced, who have not taken something from him. It might be subliminal, or it might be simple plagiarism, but his influence on me and many of my contemporaries I know has been enormous. In my opinion, the picture of Stravinsky by the grand piano taken in 44 is, I think, the finest picture ever taken. It's certainly the finest portrait ever taken. It's a massive statement to make. But once we analyse it later on in this talk, I think you'll see where I'm coming from. It's an astonishing piece of work. And I think his portraiture tells you so much about the sitter. And environmental portraiture, it's seen everywhere now. I mean, every magazine you pick up, everything's taken in people's houses or business premises. But you got to remember that he was the first to do this. It sent shockwaves through the industry, that the fact that he actually went to their premises, because everybody was being photographed back there in the studio. I take it, if you think about it, look at film stars and musical people, and magazines like Picture Gore magazine. Everything is done in the studio. So yeah, this was breaking the molds massively. He was generous, he was humble, he was open, he was honest about his photographies. He conducted many written and video interviews about his life and work. And that helps us mere mortals discover what lies behind his genius. And his love for photography generally was well known. And Albert Cardwell, who did these videos that you're seeing, he went to visit him for a college project, and he was astonished to find his house was chock-a-block, full of photographs, absolutely everywhere, on the walls and every surface. But not one of them was an Arnold Newman picture. They were all by other photographers. He had a massive love for imagery.
And so I say, and I lecture to these kids, what we are hoping to see is to see our own familiar worlds in a new, different way, put together. We want to see what they can surprise us with. To be a Picasso, to be a Edward Weston, to be a Paul Strand, or a Stiglitz, who, I don't know how, but I got to know him so well, who had an experience, which I may talk about. And if they can show us something different, something that is not good, that actually shows, oh, he copied Weston, he copied Salgado, he copied this person, that person. That is not what we're looking for. Yes, we may put them up on the walls occasionally. Not everybody can be a Stiglitz, that sort of thing, nor can we afford it. He offered me a print, and I was too embarrassed to go back to pick it up. And which reminds me of my experience with him when I first came to New York. I was starving, doing these portraits of artists, and a friend of the family offered me $15 to do a portrait, but he had a pimple. He wanted me to retouch it. And, oh, what? In those days, to retouch? To be an artist was terrible. I didn't know that Stiglitz actually did some retouching himself. But it was reality. That was honesty. And when I asked him about this retouching, he looked at me, instead of shouting at me, he smiled, and all he said was, I don't care what you do to that negative. The days before computers. He says, you can retouch it, you can spit on it, you can grind it underfoot. The only thing that matters if it is honest. If it is honest, you and everybody can tell. And if it's dishonest, you and everybody can tell it's dishonest. I'm not sure I got the right words on that last one, but it doesn't matter. That's a great teacher, and I think that explains what good photography or any good art is all about.
I thought the thing that came to me from watching that little video snippet there was the bit about truth in photography, honesty in photography. And I talked earlier on about moments in your life, in your career, that change you forever. And my moment, which some people know about and other people obviously don't, it happened to me back in when I was judging the Kodak Gold Awards. This was in Berlin. I can't even remember the date of it. I do remember that my good friend Vinny O'Byrne was a fellow judge, and I also remember that Trevor Yerbury was in the finals. But there was a picture that came up, and it was a picture of a little girl sitting in a most beautiful location with a hen, if I remember correctly, and eggs, and it was absolute perfection. And what I mean by that was it was perfectly composed. The composition was beautiful. The styling was fantastic. The clothing, the expression on the wee girl's face looking straight into camera. The print finish was absolutely wonderful. The coloration, the lighting, everything was just perfect about. But nobody else was talking about this picture. And after a little while, I decided to pipe up and say, can I just ask why nobody is talking about this image? Because I'm finding it really hard to bring points off of this picture. And I explained my thoughts, and that the composition and the lighting and the styling and the expression and the everything, it all came together as a perfect picture. And the German judge stood up and said to me, I'm not going to try it in German, but he said to me, yes, but why? And I said, what do you mean, but why? I don't understand what you mean. He says, why has it been taken? And I goes, I'm sorry, you've lost me. And he said, as far as I can see, this is a picture which has been taken by a photographer to show off technique. It's been a contrived image to show how clever the photographer was. And it tells me nothing, absolutely nothing about the sitter, but it tells me an awful lot about the photographer. And it absolutely stopped me in my tracks. Utterly stopped me in my tracks. And I started to think, does it really matter if a picture's in focus? Does it really matter if the composition isn't great? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that it didn't. The most important thing now for me in an image is that it has soul, and it has life, and it has energy, and it tells a story, and it's meaningful. And I came back from that. That was back in the 1990s. I came back from that, and it absolutely changed my photography, turned it on its head, and I started to bring in elements of this more, movement and life and joy and reality and soul into my images. And it was a big, big change for me. The fact that somebody's hand wasn't perfectly posed started to take far less relevance. And you know, a twist in the hips, you know, to make somebody thinner didn't really matter quite as much after that. So anyway, that's where it came from. Just an aside story. But let's look at this picture. It's, for me, the greatest picture I think that's ever been taken. It's really a signature portrait. It's the one that everybody thinks about and talks about when the word Newman comes up. I think it's one of the most carefully crafted images ever taken, and it's his most famous picture. But a really interesting thing is when he submitted it to the magazine, it got knocked back for something a lot safer. So nothing much changes. So if we're going to look at this picture, let's look at it in a little bit more detail, just to see exactly how this comes together. Now, there's a little video at the end of this where he's actually talking about this picture, which is quite interesting. But let's just go through here. So the first thing is, if I can get it to change picture. The first thing to notice is the composition. It's astonishing. It's got massive strength, and that's due to the very clever use of triangles and angles, which of course is a compositional hotspot. It's an amazing thing to use in your images to build strength, etc. It's got the image of strength, power, and confidence. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, you can see by the yellow mark here that this is the first triangle that's been used in this picture. It's one of many. And this is the second one, and I love this one. I love the fact that he's actually moved the piano to this perfect position against the two walls. So basically that's two walls behind there, and one's at an angle and one's behind, and the other one is obviously the white wall at the front. And he's positioned that lid of the piano in an extraordinary place for strength and composition. Triangle number 3 is here, and triangle number 4 is here. I absolutely love that. Anyone back in the 1940s who thought, let's put the sitter so far into the left-hand corner, or any corner for that matter, would have been it would have been deemed madness. But it's astonishingly strong. And you can see another one here. And I love the way that it's dissected. I love the way that it's like in two sections. You got the dark wall, which is working with the lighting on the face, and you got the piano lid, which is in silhouette against the white. It's just amazing. It's so graphic, isn't it? And one of the most extraordinary things is the note, musical note made by the shape of the piano. All in all, it's amazing. And I love the piano body, tiny along the bottom there. Just that little slither of it. Oh my God, to think that this was made in the 40s. I would die to take a picture like this today. It is amazing. Extreme cropping, extraordinary for the time, as I say. So to be placed so far left that he's almost out of the frame. But all elements of the picture as a whole lead the viewer to look directly at the sitter. It is a quite a brilliant piece of work.
Well, I don't think there is a style. If you take a look at my photograph, there's Stravinsky. Not really an environmental portrait if you want to go by the tight terms. I don't believe in rules, regulations, or anything else. That's the environmental portrait that I supposedly invented is something that was somebody first said it in describing my work. Everybody was saying I was a father of environmental portrait. But I photographed every way that I can put a picture together, make it work as a composition, not haphazardly. Every little thing counted. In other words, I was really subconsciously building my photographs like a painter, which I was at one time. would build a painting. It could be extremely simple, it could be extremely loose. The only way, as I heard one artist say to another artist looking at a de Kooning, but it works. And I try to make them work, say, I want reality, this is a man you can believe in, you can believe it's this man, you can believe the picture, or if it's a little out of this world, like a Stravinsky or a Max Ernst, or the more formal portraits I just did of Peter Gabriel, which I did this summer. I spent several days in England for that. Or maybe just a few months before of Saul Bellow, which is very casual, altogether different. So what the hell is the Newman style? I don't know. It's just that they work. Peter Gabriel asked me to photograph him. He was a fan of mine, so he says. I didn't know who he was because I'm long-haired that goes back to long-haired Rachmaninoffs and so on. And you wouldn't know it by my haircut. It's new, too short. And all these pictures are the pictures that satisfy me. Now, the picture I did of Woody Allen is not the same picture the same attitude I took to as I did Mondrian. Mondrian reflected his work. The Max Ernst was kind of, as way of best I could, surrealistic because of this huge chair with the smoke. But it was reality. That's the chair that he bought. It was a theatrical chair, really, a second-hand theatrical chair, which he left to Duchamp, who I got to know. I was a kid when I came to New York, and all these artists took me in. I don't know what it is. It's just a picture that satisfies me. I guess that's my style.
I gotta say, I love that wee video there where he said that he doesn't have any rules and regulations and doesn't conform. And I think it's the absolute opposite. I think whether it's meant or whether it's subliminal, I think he's working on the rules of art to the nth degree, because when you start to look at these images, he knows exactly what he's doing, and they are so brilliantly crafted. I don't want to sort of argue with the great man. Some of the compositions are amazing. We're going to have a look at a picture of Paul Strand, the artist, in a little minute, and that is something else. But let's have a look at this one, because this is another extraordinary picture. This is Igor Stravinsky, and this is 20 years after the last picture has been taken. Igor Stravinsky is obviously getting a little bit older in this image. 20 years older to be exact. But this is extraordinary. So again, if we have a look at this picture, and we'll go through this reasonably quickly because this is taking quite a bit of time. So I love the strong repetitive pattern on the floor. Very, very powerful lead in, lead out lines. And it's actually going from the bottom of the frame right out to the top of the frame. And that's an amazing sort of zoom rush thing right into the picture. Powerful, powerful picture. Also the rule of thirds, of course. Newman, I think he was a master at obeying the rules, even though he says he wasn't. However, in this image, he's placed the subject just a little towards the centre, which gives the viewer just a slightly uneasy feeling. Most photographers would have put Stravinsky bang on that third line, and that would have been a more sensible thing to do. So, maybe he does know. Maybe he doesn't stick to the rules, and maybe got to take this all back. But this is an extraordinary thing. He could have moved these tables, but he's kept them in. And I think that it's really important that he has kept them in, because it's almost created a sense of reality in the picture. It would have been, if that wasn't there, this would have just simply been an exercise in design and graphic design. And I think by leaving these in, it's been a work of genius. It's keeping your attention. It's your attention isn't diving at the top of the right hand of the frame. You're actually keeping your attention. It's almost acting like a frame, actually on Stravinsky's self, which I think is a fabulously powerful tool. I love the pose in the body position. The hands are in almost a prayer type position, and that's creating a strong triangle as well, with the table and his position. It's almost like Newman's trying to sort of tell the viewer that there is an element of fragility and old age in this picture. And I think by keeping the glasses and the walking stick on the table, I think he's done that in a very perhaps obvious way, but a way that really works. And I love the way that the stick is running at the same angle as the lines. Just absolutely brilliant. And then there's strong psychological lines of him looking down at that picture. So what's happening is, once you go into his face, you tend to stick to that area because the eyes are pointing you to where you should be looking. So the general overall composition in this picture is massively strong. Just extraordinary picture.
You've also asked me, why do I take pictures the way I do? It's simply preparation. I can, most of the time, when I've been assigned to something, if I can, I'll go there at first, particularly if I'm doing color. I want to see my technical problems. But most of the time I walk in cold. So I have to be prepared, not only with cameras and film and lights and so on. I got to be prepared up here. And I have to know something about that subject. Sometimes the only way you can find it is in Who's Who, where the secretary will tell you a lot of bull, and that's what or they'll tell you he's better photographed on the right side than the left side. And then you have to have your instincts. I think that has to be developed. As I said, I was lucky. As a kid, I talked to adults in our hotels. So when you go in, you look around and you'll say, oh my God, that'll make good. And you'll put this person here, you put them there, where you'll find them as you work. For instance, I was at only yesterday, I was at a memorial service. It was a very large, high room. I couldn't understand most of it, kind of my bad hearing, and I needed new hearing aids. And the woman who died, her husband was a good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he represented me in the old days when he was a photographer's rep, and he did the advertising rep. He was wonderful. We were good friends. But he eventually dropped that. And but she was a cellist. And so he had a friend of his called Yo-Yo Ma to a couple of times, and he wanted me to meet Yo-Yo, and I never met him. And when we met him just before the memorial service started, I was introduced to him, and we became instant friends because we started talking about our work just like we're doing here. And he was telling me about his pictures. I told him about the concerts I heard him at and all that sort of thing. And we have mutual friends like Isaac Stern, who died a year ago. And so Yo-Yo got up, and we both agreed I had to photograph him. As a matter of fact, I've always wanted to. And Yo-Yo got up and went to the head. And there was no clapping, of course. Everybody nodded their head. And Yo-Yo got his cello out and started to play. As he played, I was listening to the music. Mostly I was thinking how I was going to photograph him. Suddenly I had an idea, this man with the cello, and I'm not going to say how a close-up could be done that says he's a cellist. Not playing, but in other words, I was already thinking without seeing where he worked, well, I know where he worked, what his home looked like, whether he had a studio in his home like Isaac did, Isaac Stern. I was already thinking how I would photograph him. And that's why it's that old story when this whole group from Texas got lost downtown with all their own personal, the rich ones, all their limousines they shipped on ahead by their own private airplanes. And they all got into it and got hopelessly lost with their Texan chauffeurs. and they saw a little fiddle player with his hat on the ground looking for coins, and they stopped and said, "We'll find out." And they went over and said, "How do we get to Carnegie Hall?" You practice, you practice, you practice. And that's the same damn thing in photography. Some of the best pictures I've ever taken, and that was when I was looking at the piano in this Campbell's funeral home where they would occasionally have some. And I'll never forget a friend of mine playing that piano when another composer was dying. And it was beautiful. Added the new approach to, I was taking pictures, but I didn't have a camera with me. The best pictures I've ever taken, maybe, I didn't have a camera with me.
I don't know about you guys, but I can totally relate to what he was saying there, because I spend most of my life looking for light, whether I'm having a meal, whether I'm having a drink, whether I'm sitting in the car. I'll see a window, I'll see a person, and I just want to photograph it. And I think he's right. The best photographs that I've never taken have been because I've seen some light somewhere. I do. I'm a real passionate advocate of looking. And do you know what's great is the fact that we've got our iPhones with us nowadays, or whatever it may be, whatever phone, whatever mobile device. But the fact that we've got them on us all the time, we can at least. I'm using it more and more. In fact, the amount of times that I pick up a proper camera now is few and far between. So that's one thing. But I want to move on now to an incredibly important picture. Alfred Krupp. I'm probably not going to talk too much about this picture. I'm going to let him explain it in the video at the end here, and it's incredibly powerful. So I want you to watch that and just take it. And it's an extraordinary story. But one of the most amazing images. He was a war criminal. He was a Nazi, and after the war, he became an industrialist, making trolley carts and railway carriages and all that kind of stuff. And Arnold Newman was commissioned. I think it was Time Life. It might have been Newsweek. I don't know. Maybe he'll explain it in the video. But he was asked to take this image, commissioned to take this image of Krupp in Essen in Germany, and he didn't want to do it. But he eventually did. And when he met him, he was perfectly cordial to him, and he got him to sit back, positioned the lights, got him to sit back, and it was a perfectly nice picture. Took the photograph, showed the minders the picture on a Polaroid, and they said that was okay. And then as he was taking the pictures, after being given the green light, he kept moving him forward, so that the lights went off his face and went round the side, and basically made him look an absolute menacing, evil guy in the image. So rule of thirds, very, very strong. Lights, very, very strong. Very powerful, menacing look. Rule of thirds, incredibly powerful use of rule of thirds in this image. We've got a triangle shape, which is used all the time in Arnold's work. And then these lines here are like a leading line almost, leading you towards the head. Like a counter triangle almost. But it's a supremely powerful piece of work. And once you hear Arnold's explanation of it, it becomes even more astonishing. So let's just sit back and listen to Arnold Newman talking about his portrait of Alfred Krupp.
Years and years later, I was asked by Newsweek to photograph Alfred Krupp. I said no. I said, why not? I think of him as a devil. They said, fine, that's what we think of him. And here I wanted to use one of the rare times I wanted to put a knife in his back. And I could go on for hours saying about how they tried to stop me once they looked at me and realized I was Jewish, and maybe, he had used slave labor, mostly Jews, and underfed them and shipped them off to Auschwitz when they were 2 weeks of work. And he looked like a very nice, handsome man, an industrialist. He had been to jail as a war criminal, And they, for that reason, let him out, gave him his money back, everything else. And they tried to stop me and everything else, but I insisted they show him. Krupp, his vice president, said it's off. Insisted they show him my pictures. He thought they were wonderful. He didn't realize. I got him up on a platform they built for me I planned this with a bay of factories going on behind him, or building heavy machinery and things like trolley cars or railroad cars. And it was almost working. I didn't do the obvious, lit him from the bottom. That would have been too obvious. I just had on the two sides. And we're just working. I said, Herr von Bohlenkopf, would you kindly just lean forward? And he went like this. And suddenly the lights worked. And my hair stood on, and I pulled a Polaroid, put it in the box I carried, the carrying case. It was a hard case. I put it in that case, and I took several pictures, black and white and color. In those days, we would bracket like mad. And it turned out to be one of my best photographs. It was my impression of a Nazi who managed to survive, yet killed millions of people. Not all were Jews. There were doctors, there were laborers that were offensive to the Nazis. And I consider that one of my more important pictures.
What did I tell you? Absolutely incredible piece of video and an amazing photograph. So we've got a couple left now. We're going to speed on. So this is Truman Capote, taken in 1977 in New York. And again, I think this is absolutely extraordinary. If I can make it work. There we go. So, magical image, you're right, of Truman Capote languishing in all his camp splendor and triumphantly captured by Arnold Newman. It's the most extraordinary pose. Analysing the image, the first place to start again is the rule of thirds. He's used it to absolute perfection all his working life. And let me tell you, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us. This is a rule that holds your pictures together. This is a rule that helps you design your image around the grid. And the rule of thirds is an extraordinarily powerful thing. Now, I've been told by photography students and art students, we don't use the rule of thirds, something? It's used in 99% of all great art, so, just use it. So here we go here. Absolutely perfect use of rule of thirds. It's got an amazing balance as well. There's peace and harmony created by the balance, and it works well in this image. It's got a relaxed feeling, but it's also telling you something about Capote's personality. The way that he's surrounded by his trinkets, the pose, the hand, the hat, the tilt of the hat, and then everything surrounding him in that extraordinary chair. Beautiful, beautiful image. It also relaxes to the relaxed pose, the horizontal pose, adds to this relaxed image. If you're talking about the psychology of lines, horizontal is a quiet line. Horizontal means that somebody's sleeping or somebody is dead. There's no threat, there's no pressure, there's nothing, right? The same for a totally vertical line. That's like a tree. It's it's standing in a field, but there's no wind, there's no movement. If you get a little curve in that line, that's like just a little gentle breeze. So you can use a gentle curve in your pictures to create a peaceful feeling. Now, if you start to get a straight line and it's starting to fall over at an oblique angle, you're now starting to bring tension in your picture. So it starts off as peaceful, as a vertical, and as we move down through it, it gets more and more tense until we're horizontal, which becomes peaceful again. So this is helping as a compositional tool to tell us a story, shall we say, in this picture. This pose is absolutely wonderful. You have got no doubt in your mind that Newman has nothing to do with that pose. This is Truman Capote. This is Capote's pose. He's done that. There is no way a photographer can get a sitter to do that. But Newman has captured it absolutely fantastic. The tilt of the hand, the tilt of the hat, the trailing hand, it just tells you all about his lifestyle. It's a wonderful storytelling picture. And the surrounding props are really amazing. And the one thing that I couldn't believe when I looked at this, every single one is looking at camera. And it took me ages to see that. And I just think, I don't know if it was deliberate, I don't know if it was an accident. I'm going to guess that he did it. I'm going to guess that he turned them all so that they're all pointing towards the camera. And I just think that is an astonishing piece of storytelling. Wonderful, wonderful image. We'll move on to the last one. Alright guys, on to the last picture now. Paul Strand, this is one of my absolute favourites. And once you see the amount of work that's went into this picture and the design and composition of it, you'll be amazed. Amazing picture, taken in New York City in January 1966. The shapes and the composition might at first appear to be a bit random, but I would suggest that the pose has been directed to the nth degree by Newman and matching the shapes on the body with the background. So if we look at this first shape here, I don't know if it's metal, I think it must be metal. The shape of the arm with the shape of the line in the metal, and then if we look at the bottom one, we've got the shape here echoed by the shape up the top. Now, what's really interesting about that is holding that picture together. That's making your mind see design, see balance, and it's actually giving a sort of homogeneous whole of this image. It's just fantastic. It's been split in half, so it's in two sections. It's in the left-hand section, and it's in the right-hand section, and that's beautiful, and that's exactly the same as was used in that Stravinsky example in the 1940s shot at home, when he used the wall to dissect a picture in two. Very, very clever tool. Another amazing tool is he is banging the quarter, so it's actually split again into halves and quarters and thirds, and it's just amazing. So he's in the bottom left-hand corner. And I love the shade. So we've got the dark shades and we've got the light shades, and they're sort of competing and countering with each other. So that's your dark shades and that's your light shades. And what I love about this is the split lit. And the split lit in the face, which is a fantastically powerful tool to use, lighting tool to use on a guy, is matching perfectly the line down the middle as well. And that's really, really clever. I absolutely adore this picture, and listen, I hope you guys have enjoyed the last hour and exploring a little bit of the life and the work of, to me, one of the great masters of portraiture, Arnold Newman. You know, check out some more of his stuff on the internet. That's what it's there for. Buy some of his books. You know, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that the rest of your lockdown is successful. I hope that once we come back to commerce again, I hope that you're all incredibly successful and get your orders into Loxley's and get some beautiful pictures created for your customers. So listen, guys, it's been a pleasure, and I will see you next time.
Well, yeah, but, well.